Welcome back to math class. This is Mrs. Witt, and we are going to be revisiting how to turn fractions into percents in a quick mini lesson. We did it last week, but I feel like we needed to kind of look at it just a little bit more specifically because I saw a lot of mistakes. So I first want us to recall that a fraction bar is just another way of saying divided by. So if we see 75 over 100 means the same thing as 75 divided by 100. If we're going to write that out as in long division, we're going to say 75 divided by 100. And how do we do that? Because that number on the inside that's being divided up is smaller than the other number. Well, we know that to do that, we're going to have to expand this out with some decimal points to make that work. So if we're going to do this using long division and not a calculator, which here soon we're going to start using calculators, but I need to make sure that you understand why that calculator works, what the calculator's doing. So if I'm going to do this, I'm going to say, well, 100 is too big to go into 75, so I expanded with some decimals and I lined up my decimal point up top so I don't forget it. Well, let's see. Let's say 75 is too small, but 100 does go into 750 7 times. So 7 times 100, going to do this place by place, is 700. 750 minus 700 gives me 50. Then I'm going to make a copy of that 0. I'm going to bring it down here. Now 100, how many times does it go into 500? Well, 5 times. So 5 times 100 is 500. There's no remainder on that, so check mark, I'm done. So I've seen here that 75 over 100 can be written like this or like this. And either way, it will give me the same thing. 0.75 is my decimal. And I'm going to be moving through this kind of quickly, so if you need to press pause to work some things out on your own and check back in, do that, or you can rewind the video, however is going to make the most sense for you to get good practice out of this. So I know, let's practice, let's do this with long division. I know that 4 divided by 20 can be written as 4 divided by 20. And I look at that and I see that 20 is too big to go into 4. So I know I'm going to need to expand this with some decimals, right? Well, let's see. 20 is too big to go into 4, but 20 can go into 40. How many times? 2 times. So 2 times 20 is 40. I subtract those. I get 0. I don't need to bring anything else down. Check mark. I'm done. So I see what I discovered here was that 4 over 20, or 4 twentieths, or 4 divided by 20, is the same thing as 0.2, 0.2. Okay, well, let's look at the next one. 5 over 25 is the same thing as 5 divided by 25. And again, I see that 25 is too big. It's too big to go into 5 right away. So I need to expand this out with some zeros. Let's just start with 1. And remember, I'm going to put that decimal right up top. I'm going to make sure it's lined up. So 25 is too big to go into 5, but it is not too big to go into 50. 25 into 50, I can get 2 in there. So 25 times 2 is actually exactly 50. So when I subtract those two, I get 0. Check mark, I'm done. What I discovered is that 5 25ths, or 5 over 25, or 5 divided by 25 is, well, this one is also 0.2. We used some equivalent ones there. That was unintentional. Okay, so that was the first step, was using that long division, understanding that the fraction bar is the same thing as saying divided by. The second thing I want you to recall is that to convert a number into a percent, you just multiply by 100. And we remember that shortcut that when you multiply by 100, you can just move the decimal 2 places to the right. Because when you multiply by 100, it does just move the decimal 2 places to the right. So 0.75 converted into a percent is 75%. Because what I did is I took that, let's see, I take that 0.75 and I multiply it by 100. So if I take that 0.75 and I want to use my shortcut method, I know that if I took it times 10, it would move the decimal here. If I took it times 100, it would move the decimal here. So this is where my new decimal point is going to go. So 0.75 is the same thing as 75%. I need to remember to write that percent symbol in there. So let's practice that with a couple of them. Let's see, if I do 0.22, well, let's just move that decimal 2 places to the right, and that gives me, my new decimal place will go here. So I can write that as 22%. And if I had just 0.2, well, I'd still move it 2 places over, and that would put a decimal here, and I've got this empty basket there. I need to fill that up with a 0. I can't leave that empty. So 0.2 is the same as 20%. Well, what if I have 0.02? Well, let's use the same process. We move this over 1 over 2. That gives me my new decimal point. So that's just, oh goodness. So that is just 2%. Because if that 0 is out in front of a whole number, we don't have to write that down. What if we have more than 2 places there? So I'm looking at this. I've got 0.222. And if I move this over 1, 2 places, my new decimal point is right there. And it's not at the end like it has been. But you know what? That's okay. Because your decimal will just be 22.2%. So it didn't get any harder. And what if I have a whole number there? I have something bigger than just the decimal point. Well, I'm still going to do the same process. I'm going to move it over 1, 2 places. This is my new decimal. And that just means that I have 222%. Okay, so nothing complicated. When you're taking a decimal, turning it into a percent, just multiply by 100. So we know we can do that just by shifting our decimal 2 places to the right. So let's put this all together. If we want to go and convert from a fraction to a percent, you divide the numerator by the denominator to get a decimal, and then multiply by 100, which is just moving that 2 places to the right. So looking at this, I have, let's see, 75 divided by 100. Well, I know that I can do that using long division. I'll put my percent up there, or my decimal there, and I'm going to get a 7. That leaves me with 50. Bring down a copy of my 0. It's 5. Well, that indeed does match what I anticipated. And then I know that I can take my 0.75 to finish this process and multiply it by 100. Move it over to get my new decimal point, which is going to be at the end of it, which does indeed give me what I anticipated, 75%. So let's practice this really quickly, just on a couple of fractions. And again, like I said, you can pause, you can rewind, work these out yourself however you feel is going to be the best for you. So what I want to do is I want to take this, I want to go from a fraction to a percent. So I know that I can do that by, let's see, first what I want to do is I want to divide the 2. So I know I'm going to do 3 divided by 5. Well, that's too big. So I'm going to put my decimal there. 5 doesn't go into 3, but 5 does go into 30 6 times. 6 times 5 is 30. When I subtract those, no remainder, I'm done. So now I've got 0.6, and the next step is to move the decimal 2 places over, right? And remember that if there is an empty basket there, I got to fill it with a 0. So I have 60%. So I know that 3/5 is the same thing as 0.6, which is the same thing as 60%. Okay, let's do it one more time. It's just one more time. So 4 25ths is the same thing as 4 divided by 25. 4 is not big enough. 25 can't go in there, so I need to expand this out with some decimals. I'm going to line up my decimal points so I don't forget them. 25 is too big to go into 4, but it is not too big to go into 40. I can fit a whole 120, just a single 25 in there. Okay, so 40 minus 25 is 15. Well, I still have that remainder of 15, so I'm going to bring down a 0, a copy of that 0, and try again. 25 goes into 150. Well, I think about quarters and dollars, and I know if I have $1.50, that's actually made up of 6 quarters. So let's see, that gives me 6 times 25 is 150. If I subtract those, it gives me 0. Well, that tells me no remainder. I'm done. So I know that my answer is 0.16. Now I've got it to the decimal. I need to turn it into a percent by moving that over 2 places, because that's what happens when I multiply by 100. And what I found is it is 16%. So we've discovered that 4 divided by 25, or 4 over 25, 4 25ths, is the same thing as 0.16, which is the same thing as 16%. So I'm not against calculators, and sometime we will maybe use calculators, but for right now, what I'm noticing is that a lot of our classmates don't really understand long division all that well yet. Maybe it's still just a little confusing how we take a number that's smaller and divide a big number into it. So we're going to practice this without a calculator for just a little while. And then maybe we will expand into some calculator work. But that is it. That is all you need to know to do any of our work this week on going from a fraction to a percent. Remember, what you're going to do is you're going to divide, and then you're going to move 2 to the right. Okay? So the dividing gets you from a fraction to a decimal, and then you turn that into a percentage by moving that decimal place 2 places to the right. All right, have at it.